The Battle of Salamis, 480 BC. 10 years after the defeat of the Persians at Marathon, 490 BC, the heir to the Persian throne, Xerxes, again marched against the Greeks with a strong army and navy. After the Persian victory at Thermopylae and the abandonment of Artemisium by the Greek fleet, Xerxes sent his ground forces to Attica. On their way south, they looted and destroyed every town in their path that did not voluntarily surrender, such as Thespia and Plataea. The Persian ground forces invaded Attica, which they pillaged and burned, while the Persian fleet anchored at Phaleron. The next military move of the Persian king was to attack the Greek defensive line located at the Isthmus of Corinth, in order to subjugate the Greek cities of the Peloponnese as well. A Persian war council was held, during which Artemisia, queen of Halicarnassus, advised Xerxes not to fight a naval battle in the area of Salamis. She considered it likely that the Greek fleet would shortly disperse, as the diverse ships that constituted the navy would leave to protect their own city-states, ignoring the rest of the fleet. The Persians, however, apparently sought the conquest of Salamis, as it would open their way toward the isthmus. The Greek fleet was assembled at 3 points: the Athenians at Salamis, the Aegnetines at Aegina, and the rest were located at present-day Poros. The Peloponnesian ground forces, led by Leonidas' brother Cleombrotus of Sparta, were encamped at Isthmus. Strategically, the Greeks had to defend by land and sea, because the Persian fleet could easily bypass the defensive line on the ground at the Isthmus and sail directly from Attica to the Peloponnese. Only by controlling the Saronic Gulf could the Greeks prevent the Persian fleet from reaching the Peloponnese. Before the start of the conflict, the Athenians had consulted the oracle at the sanctuary of Delphi regarding the outcome of the war. The oracle replied, "The wall of wood shall stay impregnable." According to Plutarch, Themistocles argued that the wooden wall mentioned in the prophecy was none other than the warships. He thus persuaded the Athenians to evacuate their city and go to Salamis. At the same time, he persuaded the Spartan commodore Eurybiades to fight a naval battle in the area of Salamis, since the Persians could not fully develop their large fleet in such a restricted space. Using tricks, Themistocles lured Xerxes into fighting a naval battle at Salamis, because the Athenian general feared the possibility that the Greek fleet would disperse if not quickly engaged. Aeschylus, in his play The Persians, mentions that the Persian fleet consisted of 1,207 ships. The same number of ships is noted by Herodotus as well at the start of the campaign. Out of this total, 400 ships were destroyed at Pilion, Scipiada, 200 at Gila of Evia, and approximately 70 at the Battle of Artemisium. Herodotus states that the Persian fleet received reinforcements during the campaign, but it is doubtful that they made up for all the losses. Most likely, around 1,000 Persian ships participated in the Battle of Salamis. A main disadvantage of the Persian fleet was that many ships were commanded by Persian nobles who had no naval experience. The most battle-ready crews were those of the Ionians and the Phoenicians. However, the loyalty of the former was under strong suspicion. First, the Persians conquered the island of Psydalia, lying in the middle of the space where they believed the naval battle would take place, and from which they could collect any shipwrecked Greeks. Then they arranged the Persian fleet in a line from Cape Ginossera of Salamis to Minichia, Piraeus. The main body of the Persian naval forces moved, after midnight, from Phaleron to Elefsis. At the head of the fleet were the Phoenician ships, followed by the naval forces of the several other allied nations, with the Ionian fleet bringing up the rear. The line of the Persian fleet exceeded 5 to 6 kilometers in length. They sailed in such a way that they could immediately transform from a marching formation to a battle formation just by turning their bows to the left. The front of the formation faced Salamis, where the Greek fleet was lined up. Amphiale, Berama, was at the back of the Persian formation. At the same time, a small number of Persian ships had been sent round to the south of Salamis in order to prevent any Greek ships from exiting the area. The formation of the Greek fleet was as follows. On the right eastern flank, toward Ginossera, were the 16 triremes of the Spartans, led by Eurybiades. And next to them, further east, were 30 Aeginetan ships. In the center were the rest of the fleet, minus the Athenians. While on the left flank, in the area in front and to the west of the island called Aios Iorios today, was the Athenian fleet led by Themistocles. The Spartan Eurypiades commanded the Greek forces as at Artemision. At dawn, the Greeks began to attack. When the Persians saw the Greek fleet sail aggressively against them, they launched a counterattack. In about the middle of the Strait of Salamis, where the space was larger and favored the Persian naval forces, the Greek fleet stopped moving forward and the rowers started rowing in reverse, so that the bow of the ship faced the Persians, but the movement was to the rear. This lured the Persian ships into a position more favorable for the Greeks, to a narrower place that would restrict the maneuverability of the enemy fleet and limit the number of Persian ships able to enter the area. The retraction was executed orderly, in contrast to the movement of the Persians. Eventually, the Greek fleet lined up over 3 kilometers with Kynossera on the right and on the left the island known today as Aios Iorios. This formation precluded any attempt by the Persian navy to overcome the flanks. In addition, the narrowness of the area did not allow the Persians to put at the front any more ships than that of the Greek formation, resulting in a naval battle with an equal number of ships. However, more important for the successful outcome of the naval battle was the bravery and skill of the Greek crews, as well as the flexibility of their ships. Plutarch notes that the Greek navy delayed their attack until the daily light wind started to blow. The breeze caused the Persian ships to rock, while the Greek ships remained unaffected. The Athenian fleet took advantage of this rocking, as it caused the Persian archers to miss fire. It was Arminius of Pellene, brother of Aeschylus, who first started the attack by ramming a Phoenician ship with his trireme. In a short time, the conflict was generalized. At the right end of the front, Kynossera, the Spartans and Aeginetans faced the skillful Ionians. The Spartans and the experienced Aeginetans succeeded, despite being under strong pressure, in maintaining their position. As was natural, the right flank of the Greeks was limited in a defensive battle. On the left flank, the mighty Athenian fleet had 180 triremes led by Themistocles. Facing them were the Phoenicians. The tactic employed by the Phoenicians was to fight from their elevated decks by launching countless arrows and throwing spears. The Athenian triremes had only 4 archers and 14 hoplites, which gave them a substantial advantage over the Phoenicians as they were lighter and more maneuverable. At the same time, the Athenian triremes rushed the Phoenician ships, sometimes passing close enough to break their oars, and at others ramming them. After ramming an enemy ship, the Athenian hoplites jumped aboard and occupied it, killing the crew or let it sink. For a long time, the progress of the battle was ambiguous. In the afternoon hours, the Athenians, with their flexible triremes, managed to prevail, causing the demise of the Phoenicians. Confusion ensued, and the enemy suffered great losses. Soon, this situation turned into panic, which spread to the nearby ships of the Phoenicians. Very quickly, the turmoil reached the center of the Persian fleet. After the collapse of the enemy's left front, the Athenian triremes turned toward the center. The naval battle finally began to lean in favor of the Greeks. Soon, the Persian naval forces fled toward Phaleron, with the Athenian and Aeginetan ships in pursuit. Around sunset, Aristides prepared a phalanx with Athenian hoplites and pentaconters and crossed through to Psydalia. As mentioned above, the Persians had previously installed forces here. Under the command of Aristides, the Athenian hoplites killed all the Persians and occupied the island. The loss of Psydalia had repercussions for the rest of the Persian fleet, because it meant that they lost any kind of protection that could come from land. At the same time, Ariobagus, brother of Xerxes and head of the Ionian carrying flotilla, was killed by the Athenians, an act which stopped any resistance by the Persians. By the end of the battle, the Persian fleet had lost 200 ships and the Greeks 40. Among the Persian casualties were many eminent Persians. In honor of the warriors who fell in the battle, the Greek forces erected a tomb near Kynossera. The outcome of the Battle of Salamis was important, as it forced the Persian navy to withdraw definitely from Greece. This had four key repercussions. Firstly, it separated the navy of Xerxes from his ground forces. In administrative terms, the fleet had functioned as support for the large number of Persian troops marching through Greece. The departure of the fleet forced the Persians to limit the magnitude of the army that remained in Greece, the army of Mardonius, which stayed to deliver a final decisive blow to the Greek forces. Secondly, any overpowering of the isthmus by sea was now impossible. Thirdly, a large military force consisting predominantly of Athenians that up until then had served the fleet was now available for other purposes. Finally, the domination of the Greek navy prevented the Persians from undertaking a new military campaign against Greek territory because their communication lines from the coastline of Asia Minor to mainland Greece were now exposed to the Greek fleet.